Hello, and welcome back to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Brown, and I'm the editor at Guns on Pegs. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Horn, managing director of Guns on Pegs. Chris, we're back. It feels like a while since we recorded a proper podcast, but a lot's happened since then. How are you feeling? How's the wedding?
Oh, it's good, mate. Yeah, really good, thank you. It's really nice to be back, and can I also thank all those very kind people who enjoyed our emergency cop-out episode. It was very much appreciated with the diary that we've both had. So thank you to those people.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've both been very busy, but we're now all set, and this is now Game Fair lead-up week, so it's culminating. There's a lot happening.
Yeah, it's all very exciting. But first, I think before we talk about any of that sort of stuff, Chris, we'd better just introduce our guests for this episode.
Indeed. So the title of this episode is still to be decided, but it's got an obvious theme. It's all about great times with friends evolving around shooting. So when it came to thinking about appropriate guests for this topic, I went to a man who gets more excited about a shoot weekend than a Springer Spaniel seeing you in breeks on a Saturday morning. This chap, many of you will have met in the world of guns. He's worked for William Evans and he's worked for Purdey. He knows a huge amount about both those brands. And recently I'll hold it. I'll let him tell you in a second. Has just started up another new venture, which actually launches this weekend at the Game Fair. But most importantly, and the reason for this episode, this man loves a good party and he's very good at it. So I'm delighted to welcome George Juer.
Hi, Chris. Hi, George. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm not quite sure how to take that, but it's all in the name of fun.
Indeed.
Well, you were saying this just before we started recording. You were saying that some people at Purdey used to refer to you by a particular title, which I thought was quite apt. What was that?
Well, it wasn't actually people at Purdey. It was actually some clients in America. They wrote a message to a colleague of mine when I was on my way out to Virginia for a hunting trip. And they asked my colleague whether the Minister of Fun was going to be coming along. And I quite like that one.
Yeah, you should put that on your email.
What had you done? Are you going to save this one, or are you telling us? What had you done to earn that title?
Well, we'd had several trips out to this facility in Virginia. I think we'd done 2 or 3 trips out there, and some of them with actually a Guns on Pegs member, that being your father, Chris. And one of the main things that we did on any of our trips out to America was to make sure the clients had fun. And I was particularly serious about that. And ensuring that everybody has fun actually led to quite a lot of gun sales.
Much to the detriment of the marketing budget, presumably.
I couldn't possibly comment on that.
So before we go any further then, just tell us a little bit about this new venture of yours.
It's hugely exciting, and it was actually quite unexpected. I left Purdey just before Christmas and started up my own business, which was basically a consultancy business in the gun trade. And my very first client was a former Purdey colleague, Tom Cosby, and he'd started up a gun shop and a hunting agency called Old Sport Outfitters. And very soon it became apparent that we were going to work together, and we merged various businesses and started various businesses all in a very short space of time. And just as we were about to fully rebrand as Old Sport Outfitters, the opportunity to work with the Charles Lancaster name came up, and we leapt at that opportunity. Charles Lancaster was one of the most famous gun makers of the 1800s, and his business carried on right through the 1900s. He was an incredible innovator, an amazing gun maker, lots of guns out there under his name. And it was just a perfect opportunity to rejuvenate this brand, and we're really excited about doing it.
So have you got as far as sort of formulating plans for it, or is it still very, very, very new?
The great thing about this is that it's a 200-year-old brand, 200 years old in 2026. So in terms of how the brand will actually go forward, there are models for that, in the sense that Purdey, Holland & Holland, Rigby, all these other gun makers out there, they know what they're doing. They've been successful for 200 years, and we need to just continue that. And we know exactly what we want to do. We know how we want to do it. Much is yet to be revealed. I'll have to ask you to wait until the Game Fair so that you can see what's going to be happening. But I can say we are making new guns and rifles. We've been doing that for the past couple of months prior to the launch. And we have a huge selection of second-hand guns and rifles as well, and lots of other things besides.
Can you reveal any twists? Are you taking any new approaches that you haven't been able to do in any of the others?
I think the main thing for us is that we wanted to make sure that Charles Lancaster, who was known as being an innovator and known as being very modern, the main thing is we wanted to make sure that we become known as the modern gun maker. So everything you see that we will be doing will be tailored towards modern ways of doing things, and whether that's ensuring that we have digital photo frames on the stand with pictures cycling rather than actual photo frames, or whether it's the fact that we'll have beer mats with QR codes on them that you can actually scan to get your catalogue. All that kind of stuff is geared towards 21st century Britain and the 21st century shooting market.
It's very exciting. Good luck. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Huge good luck from us. So, George, you probably heard we've been organising a party.
I have heard, yes. I don't know how, but parties, I tend to hear about them.
This is probably the most long drawn out party organising, apart from a wedding, except that's not very public. This one's been a very public organisation of a party. So this is the week it all happens. I can't believe it's actually come round.
If I may interrupt you, Chris, it's been a long time coming because I think I probably knew about it before you did. I got an invitation a long time ago, so very exciting.
Well, it's all come round, and obviously the rules are now relaxed. It actually can happen. I've sort of got to pinch myself a little bit to think that this is all okay. It's all a bit odd still, but anyway, it will all go good on Saturday night. So everything's in, band sorted, absolutely. It's gonna go off. We're super excited about it. Guest list there. We've had so many listeners message in asking to get on our guest list, and essentially what it means if you get on the guest list, it essentially means you get some free drinks, 4 to be precise. So it's worth getting on the guest list for it. It just sweetens up the evening that little bit, gets you going for the dancing later on the Tom Paine stage that he doesn't really know about yet.
What would the game fair be without Tom Paine dancing?
Indeed. The thing is, if the weather's good, anyone can come to this party because the sides can be off. It just means that you won't get free drinks. So anyone can come. So if you listen to this, don't feel put out if you haven't got onto the guest list just yet. We still do have a little bit of space on the guest list, but we specifically hold some tickets back. 20 pairs of tickets. And I think this was George's idea. It might have been mine. So what we're going to do is, at the game fair, if you come and find us on our stand, we're right by the members enclosure, by the main arena. If you come and find us on our stand and tell George a good joke, then you can come to the party and get on the guest list, have some free drinks at us.
The caveat is I'm going to record the jokes to go in the next episode of the podcast. So it's got to be... Well, is it got to be clean? It's definitely got to be broadcastable.
I think don't you put this out under explicit?
I do, yes, but I still think there's probably some limits that we can't go beyond.
Oh, of course, yeah. Explicit doesn't mean.
Yeah, I'm not just talking about naughty words.
Anyway, so that's it. So I think the point is there. If you've listened to this before the game fair, do come and say hi. We'd love to hear from you because it's why we do this, to have a laugh. And there's a nice little link to today's episode.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that if you listen to this on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and you don't fancy sending us giving me a joke at the game fair, you can email pod@gunsonpegs.com and either tell me your joke in your email or give me some other excuse as to why you should come, and I'll consider putting you on the guest list as well. So it's pod@gunsonpegs.com. The party is at 6:30 on Saturday night at the game fair at the Nice and Wild restaurant. There we go. That's all the details.
Good man.
So with all that party chat, I'm thirsty. So it's time for What's That You're Drinking. George, what have you got to wet the whistle this afternoon?
Do you know what? Of any sort of interview kind of thing that I've ever done, I think this question for me was one of the most difficult. And I tried to think, what is it that I get when I go to the bar when I'm out shooting, go to the back of the Land Rover that brings out 11s and so on. And then I realized the reason why it's so difficult is because I don't go to the bar, I am the bar. So I've bought a selection of drinks today, and some of them have great meaning. But particularly the drink that I've got here is a nice little glass of marmalade vodka.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I have this marmalade vodka, I won't show you the brand because it's utterly disgusting. But the first time I got this drink out, The first time I got this drink out was about 6 years ago when I was down in Devon with you, Chris.
Oh
And I
yeah.
don't know if you remember this or not. I got it out of the back of the truck, and I remember you absolutely refusing to have any. And I had a little sip, but I also remember a very good friend of yours who had some and promptly ran to the bushes and chucked up everywhere. Um, and
It's
and
still
all I can
going.
say is that that is the same bottle that we had then, and it is to just below the neck here. And I thought I'd try some today in honor of speaking with you.
Just for the benefit of the tape, that is an extremely orange bottle. I'm assuming that's not the colour of the liquid. Is that just the branding?
No, it looks like scotch. So if anyone doesn't like scotch, but they like sugary drinks, then they can sort of get away with pretending it is until you sniff it.
For those of you familiar with the drinks market, you've really narrowed down the options of that brand by explaining this.
It's delicious, I promise you. But also, I mean, my actual go-to drink, really, which I've got here as well, is a bit of slow gin. And shameless plug, I've got some Wood Brothers slow gin here, and if you like Wood Brothers slow gin, you can buy some of that actually on our stand at the Game Fair.
There's no flies on you.
No, not at all. And same with the champagne that I've got in front of me as well. That's a delightful little glass of bubbly. But that's a shameless plug as well, because it's so hot. I'm not drinking slow gin in this heat. So I've actually got this lovely little glass of Botham and Balfour. And guess what? If you come to the Lancaster stand at the Game Fair, you can buy Botham wines off the stand. That's it.
In Lord Surrey and
as
Beefy
in
of Botham.
Lord Surrey and beefy legend Botham himself. And we will have a converted horse box bar called Tipple at the back of our stand, which will be all branded up in Botham wines. And you can come and buy your lovely wine from us, the gunmaker.
That's awesome. I've got to go next because this has already been full of nice little links. And your champagne comes from vines the other side of the hedge from where I'm sitting.
It does, yes, and it was all carefully planned, I promise you.
I mean, that's a ridiculous link. No, there's nothing else going on around us down here apart from that. So yes, very nice stuff. And you should have the Hush Heath, the Balfour Rosé. That's absolutely mega. I love it.
And of course, you've got the red deer in your back garden somewhere there as well. I saw on Instagram the other day. That was in that vineyard behind your house. A random red deer appeared, didn't it?
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
God, that is unusual for around here.
Yeah.
So my drink today is also a big plug. I'm also drinking the company stock from the weekend, like you're doing. What I'm actually drinking was a gift from John at Borders Distillery. I'm having the other drink that I didn't have the other day. So this will be available at our party. This is William Kerr's Borders Gin. And I'm soon realising it's 43%, which is slightly stronger than the average. And I've gone and poured myself a freehand pour a minute ago, which I'm slightly regretting now.
What have you? Is it you drinking it neat? John was recommending gin and tonic with a slice of orange in it, wasn't he?
Okay, so I've gone for lemon because I don't have an orange, and I do prefer lemon in gin and tonic. So it's a very straightforward gin and tonic, but it's really good. And anyway, having this on Saturday night will take me back, and I'm really looking forward to it. So anyway, I'm doing that for a massive plug for John again, Borders Distillery, because they have stepped up to the mark to lubricate everyone at this party.
And I'm now kicking myself because I was also sent a bottle of this gin, and I've just remembered that I've got a bottle of it sitting under my drinks table right now. And that would have been a much better choice for the current temperature in my flat, which is north of 30 degrees. But, as is traditional, I've got a glass of whiskey. I've just come back from my annual salmon fishing holiday on Speyside. We had an absolutely fantastic week, caught loads of fish. Well, the party caught loads of fish.
How many did you catch? Yeah.
Well, I hooked 4. I landed 1. And I think that's, having had a year off, I was a bit rusty and I tried to bully one too hard and I got broken off by another, and then one just shook the hook. So
25% conversion rate.
It's not great, is it?
No. And how many did you catch in total as a group?
The total I think was 35 for the week.
Oh.
So 7 rods in the water at any given time, but 14 people fishing. So I think top rod had 6 or 7. Annoyingly, that was my brother. But we'll say less about that than. But it was a really, really cool week, and I was 4 for 4 on gillying, netted 4 fish, which was really nice, including my sister's boyfriend's first and second fish. Oh no, hang on, only the second fish. And my brother also got engaged there, so congratulations to Jim and Georgia. I know they're listening.
Proper catch.
Yeah, that was definitely catch of the week. Although I'm not sure who is said to have done the catching there.
Do you want to give your opinion on it?
I think Jim is definitely batting above his average.
That is
Very
a common theme in the sporting world.
But anyway, so I've got my Aberlour whiskey, which is very nice, and it's not too much of a sort of heavy, peaty, wintry one. It's quite light and reasonably summery, I suppose, as far as whiskies go. But I have also got a very, very cold beer for when I've run out of whiskey, and I'm genuinely, I've got sweat dripping down my forehead right now. It's so hot in here. So right. Look, that's a lot of chat about booze. So I think it's time we moved on and did Whose Bird Is It Anyway? Now, George, just so that you know what we're about, this is the section of the podcast where we ask our listeners to send in their sort of shooting dilemmas, quandaries and queries and all that kind of thing.
I've got to chuck in because I know I haven't put it down in the running order, something to mention, but What's That You're Drinking is also now the name of a Shetland pony.
Yes. It's confirmed.
It's been confirmed. So Bethany has very kindly agreed, who is the daughter of a chap called Tom, who messaged into the podcast a few episodes ago. She's running in the Shetland Pony Grand National at the Game Fair. It runs every day. And we said to him, could we change the name of the horse to What's That You're Drinking for the Grand National? So he's agreed. And this week sent us some newly printed team gear for George and I to wear with What's That You're Drinking on the back. It's absolute gold. Bethany has Guns on Pegs podcast logo on her joppers. So when you get to the Game Fair, if you're going, look for the time of the Shetland Pony Grand National and crowd round that ring like you've never done before. A little bit like England-Italy at Wembley. Go mad, go in without a ticket. Just do what you like. This is a big one. We need so much cheering for Bethany as we possibly can.
And I was also thinking, Chris, that for people who can't be at the Game Fair, we should probably go along with our microphones and record a commentary so that we can include it in the next episode. We'll do our best horse race commentator voices.
Oh my God! Can you listen to like Cornelius Lycett on 5 Live, and that's just serious skills he's got there. It's going to come out very badly.
It probably doesn't take very long either. The Shetland Pony Grand National, does it?
They're only little, aren't they? Yeah. So George, you're going to commentate. I'll be your sort of right hand Lee Dixon man, like he was in the Euros, doing the co-commentary, or bit Gary Neville or something.
I hope you're a bit more insightful.
Anyway, so there you go. Shetland Pony Grand National. What's That You're Drinking?
Yes. Okay, so right. Whose bird is it anyway? George, just to give you the context, we ask our listeners to send in their shooting quandaries and dilemmas and queries and all that kind of stuff. And then we read them out on air. And between us, we try and work out what the right course of action was, or should have been. So this one has been sent in by somebody I have decided to call Heinrich, for reasons that will become apparent. It involves an heirloom Purdey, German aristocrats, an oil tycoon, and some bad shooting. So Heinrich wrote, I'm writing to you today from a deer stand in Germany, and I hope, if you should read this out, you will do so with an appropriate, ridiculous accent. Now, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so Heinrich goes on. As a young boy, I unwittingly happened to stumble into a fairly high aristocratic circle here in Germany. A very private circle, really, so it was always the same people at every shoot. Very informal, but very tradition-conscious. Therefore, it was unusual when one day one rather high-ranking member of the group announced that he would bring a guest, some oil tycoon from Singapore, he told us. The day in question was a fairly casual shoot. Worn-out wax jackets and cords was the order of the day. We were just sitting on the tailgates of our cars, filling up our cartridge bags. The beaters had already left to get in position, and secretly we were rather happy as this guest had not shown up after all. But the piece was suddenly interrupted by the sound of an approaching helicopter, which landed just in front of us. And down the stairs of that monster helicopter came a chap dressed in a full-on 3-piece tweed suit with a matching deerstalker hat for some reason. He was followed by his wife, who you could hardly see beneath all the furs she was draped in. Of course, they did not bring any guns with them, obviously expecting to be assigned their loaders carrying a pair of Holland & Hollands for them. And instead of saying, well, bad luck, see you next year, old chap, His Serene Highness, who had so unabashedly invited the guest, asked round if someone had brought a spare gun. Unfortunately, I had, and I was the only one. It was my grandpapa's beloved 1830s Purdey. So, against my better judgment, I went to my car and with a heavy heart I handed my late grandpapa's beloved Purdey over. As anticipated, our honoured guest was a terrible shot. Not only did he violate my gun and missed everything there was to shoot, but instead he almost killed a dog and a beater. My question to you, should I have just lied and withheld my gun?
George, you must have been in this position. I could see you with clients on a shoot in a situation like this.
Well, I was a bit scared. The story was about me to start with, but I have seen this kind of thing before, it's difficult to know what to do because you don't know actually who's going to turn up and how good they are at shooting. I think the simplest answer is don't take a spare gun shooting, and then you don't have to be put into that situation.
I don't know. I think if he'd thought a little bit quicker on his feet and linked up some of our podcast episodes, the fine should have featured, and the fine would have made this all the merrier for him. Because I think he wasn't. If this is it sounds like a fairly punchy shoot, some fairly punchy people. So we can go to the fairly punchy level of fines. I'm talking like, I don't know, $1,000, 500.
Well, I mean, I mean, you raised an interesting point there because I was interested in that title, His Serene Highness. I did a bit of Googling, and apparently there's very few people who can use that title, and some of them are members of the royal family of Liechtenstein, Monaco. You know, this is obviously quite an exalted circle this guy's shooting in, and this is obviously an oil tycoon, so he's probably got a couple of quid.
Yeah, so if he thought really quick and he said, sir, you've come to our shoot without a gun, no worries. The standard fine for that is £1,000. If you'd like to hand it over, I'll lend you my gun. I reckon he would have done.
Probably. But, I mean, the other thing, George, you'll know about this, an 1830s Purdey, that's a serious bit of kit.
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, I'd love to come across an 1830s Purdey, but I think he's slightly out on his dates there because that would actually be a muzzle loader, and therefore I would understand why he nearly shot somebody's dog. I have been on a muzzle loading shoot before, and it's quite an experience, I have to say. But I think I wouldn't be lending anything with Purdey on it to someone that had jumped out of a helicopter with a wife covered in furs.
I mean, I'm making a big assumption here as well, but if it were me, I'd have lent him my other gun. So we have to assume that we're talking a pair here, don't we?
Complicated. Ooh.
Yeah, he wasn't using a silver pigeon and then said, "Sure, have my Purdey," was he?
That's true. He was. If he'd had a pair of guns and he wasn't using a pair of guns, why would he have bought a pair of guns with him? That's the question. So, not quite sure where that second gun came from.
I think taking two guns to a shoot, if you definitely got an old English gun, you always need to take two guns to a shoot because it's just inevitable. Mine does this all the time.
Or you could just buy yourself a nice brand new Charles Lancaster and then there'd be no problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll put the link in for that after this.
But, I think in this situation, though, I think, the guy showed up. He's somebody's guest.
No, let's be honest. He didn't have a choice, did he?
No, you don't. Yeah, exactly. I don't think he really had a choice.
No, I
think the guy actually needs to count himself lucky because a lot worse things could have happened, such as a situation on a shoot where I was as a kid with my father when an American guest, it's not always the Americans, I hasten to add, but an American guest did take a rather low shot. There was somewhat of a scream from the woodland in front of him, whereupon the horn went, the keeper marched out, took the fore end off the guy's shotgun, walked back, threw it in the river and carried on the drive. Now, that was an old English gun, so that was kind of an expensive mistake for the gun to have made, but good on the keeper.
Yes. Well, I was going to say, he did say almost shot a beater.
Seeing as we're on the topics of Americans just before shoot drives, I know.
Just remember, we've got quite a lot of American listeners.
We do. Okay, this doesn't have to be American. It could just be novice shot here, who's been thrust into a situation they probably shouldn't have been. This particular host said in the before the drive, just make sure you check your barrels before every drive, please, before the horn goes. Start the first drive. bang, bang, before anyone had really got to their pegs. And he looked over at this chap and he said, "What are you doing?" He'd fired 2 shots into the ground in front of him and just said, "Well, you told me to check my barrels."
Oh dear.
Goodness me. So yeah, I think the consensus there is you probably did the right thing, and it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
At the end of the day, if it's the guest of the Serene Highness, I think you kind of do as you're told.
Yeah.
There is this as well. You know your place. Was he invited? He was invited. It wasn't the syndicate or anything. Yeah, exactly.
Invited.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, the question was a resounding, you did the right thing, you had no choice. Good.
Yeah. So we've got some more correspondence.
We do. Had this story in from another listener. We considered reading it out at the party, actually. It would have taken quite a long time. It's a fairly chunky story, but it's a good one. We thought it'd be a shame not to use it on here because obviously then more people could listen to it. It's not really a sort of who bird is it anyway, but it's a good story. And we'll call this person Mungo. I think, George, it's another one of your titlings. We're up to M, are we?
Well, no, I've just gone scattergun now.
Fair enough. Okay, so he writes, Mungo writes, I'm on the picking up team at a well-to-do East Anglian shooting estate. A stream separates 2 of its signature drives, with the pegs aligned back-to-back along the banks of the stream. One of the drives is normally shot second on the day, and the other is always shot last. The presence of the stream allows for the drives to not only show themselves extremely well, with good birds being shot, but more importantly, birds can be retrieved with some impressive dog work from the gun's peg dogs as well as the picking up dogs. After the second drive, the horn was blown and we eagerly awaited for the guns to finish working their dogs before sweeping the field and the stream. The usual morning's conversations between gun and picker started. Good morning, sir, madam, well shot. I've shot 3 and my dog is found / eaten 2. The other is there somewhere over there, normally meaning in Norfolk or Suffolk somewhere. It's at this point I must mention about the beater who always thinks he's the loader, picker, gamekeeper, but most importantly, he must touch and place every bird in the game cart. We've all seen those people. Let's call him the Snatcher, Mungo says. Snatcher walked from the beating line to look for birds and point out where all the fallen birds were in the stream as well as on the land. The dogs swept up and we all moved on to continue the day until the final drive. As mentioned, the guns were now lined out with their backs to the drive from earlier. Once again, the keepers showed some amazing birds and the sound of barrels and cheers are being heard from the line for the last drive of the day. The horn signals for the end of the day and the picking up team move forwards. It's at this last drive of the day it allows us to more freely move without a worry of a stray dog upsetting another drive and the head keeper. The stream was swept, and it's at this point our Snatcher came into his own and started hollering to a very experienced picker-up with a pack of impeccable Labradors. "It's there," cries Snatcher to our fellow picker. Let's call him Colin. "It's there, it's there." He shrieks. They just become even louder. Colin's dogs are hunting the banks of the stream, air sniffing, and are now in and out of the water looking for a bird they cannot see but they can smell. Snatcher becomes more and more animated, saying, it's there, under the water, look." A cock pheasant had been trapped and sunk below some reeds, quite possibly from an earlier drive. Colin was becoming a little irritated by Snatcher's involvement, to say the least. A tipping point was surely coming. Snatcher then shrieked, "Send your dog, send for it!" To which point, Colin, now looking at this sunken cock pheasant, replies, "It's a Labrador, not a fucking submarine." I love it. We've all been there. You can imagine these syndicate stories. It's a good one.
I love that.
Mungo, thank you for sending that in.
Yeah, so Heinrich and Mungo are now members of the most noble order of the Garters, as are you, George. And so their Garters will be in the post as soon as we get our act together. They're also invited to the party at the game fair.
We should probably apologise to those who haven't had their Garters yet. I've just been really slow on sending them, so I'm sorry about that. And if you haven't had them and you do deserve them and you've been read out, then come and grab them at the game fair.
So if you two have got a shooting confession, quandary, query, or a story that you'd like us and our guests to help you with or for us to read out, and you'd like a set of Garters, do drop us an email, pod@gunsonpegs.com. So, Chris, today's theme, as it were, is sort of everything that happens sort of either side of shooting.
Yeah.
We talk a lot. Yeah, we talk a lot about how shooting is, shooting's great, but the thing that's really great about it is the fun that you have with your mates. And that means that the fun doesn't necessarily start when the shooting starts, and it doesn't necessarily stop when the shooting stops.
Absolutely.
So
The fun starts on the WhatsApp chat months before, doesn't it? That's the whole point.
yeah.
But actually, it was proven in our game shooting census, the single most important reason that people go shooting is to have fun with their friends. So this episode is literally, as you say, George, all about that. Night before, night after is a cracking place to start, because I think that's when it all culminates, isn't it? Almost certainly the night before, it certainly culminates then, but the night after is then a big bang after the day. George, Mr. Juer, our guest, what's your preference if you could only do one? You had to choose night before the shoot or night after the shoot for a big party.
Oh, it's so difficult, and there are so many situations or things around it as to why you might choose one or the other. If I was totally free either side, I would have to say after. And I know that's not quite so much the done thing. Everyone likes to scuttle off home after a day's shooting. But the reason for that is that some people, and I definitely don't count myself in this category, but some people do tend to get a little carried away the day before, and then you can feel a little bit ropey.
But you've never done that.
No, I haven't. I'm teetotal, but no, it's definitely something that I like to look forward to after a day is not having to rush off, and then you can have a glass of wine or two at lunchtime, and you don't have to worry about driving, especially if you're staying where you're shooting. So that's why actually, if I didn't have to get off somewhere, I would actually want to have my fun the night after the evening of the shoot.
I'm really surprised you say that. I honestly thought you were going to go before. In charge, George, what would you say?
In charge, been promoted. I think the way that my shooting typically pans out, I'm generally working Monday to Friday, so we should tend to shoot on a Saturday. Friday evening is traveling, and then we might have a bit of a get together. Typically, these are family shoots, and so there'll be a kind of coming together. But as George says, we do take it fairly steady on those nights because you don't want to be feeling rough the next morning. And so we then shoot on Saturday. And I mean, at one occasion comes to mind where we had the sort of the youngsters shoot, as it were. Everybody under 35 on our shoot at home, and we shot through, and the shoot lunch, as it were, finished at midnight, and my sister's boyfriend and I had to go and conduct a raid on my dad's wine cellar at about 11 o'clock. And sorry to do this to you, Paddy, but he did fall down the cellar steps, which was hugely entertaining. I just think it's a nicer way of doing it, really. Nobody's, as you say, George, no one's got to dash off. You can sort of cut loose a bit because you know that you're not going to have a shotgun going off next to your head the next day. Having made the mistake of going in a little too hard once or twice, I know that there's no worse cure for a hangover than a 12 bore going off.
But George, I think also it's not even just about going necessarily too heavily, shall we say, the night before. It's also about just the ability to have a nice drink. Now, I know Chris better than I know you, and I know both he and I love a very nice wine. But if I take one of the nicest shoot lunches that I have possibly ever had, where Chris was there at a certain high bird shoot in Wales, where they brought out bottles of Louis XIII cognac.
It doesn't narrow it down at all, George.
But they brought out some bottles of Louis XIII cognac for tasting afterwards, and some wines that are just amazing. It was a fantastic Christmas lunch that we had. And Chris, if I remember rightly, on that day, you were actually driving, I think. And in that situation, if we'd been staying on site or nearby taxi distance away, let's say, I think the fun could have been so much more.
Yeah, this is
definitely true.
But it's the thing. I don't know about you, but a lot of my shooting involves quite a lot of travelling. I'm not like in the local syndicate down the road, and because of the nature of what we do, my average journey to a shoot is like usually about 3 hours. Therefore, I always have to leave the night before. So I'm always staying the night before, and staying 2 nights is just a lot bigger ask, right? Rather than getting home, because obviously then you're starting work late the next day. So for me, I never ever really stay the night after, and also because of what we do, There's very little shooting on Saturdays. Weirdly, I don't know why, because it is the most common day to go shooting. So it's like when my mate organises his big mate's day, and it's on a Monday, and he's like, "We're gonna have the big thing the night after," and I'm thinking, so we get there Sunday night, have a few drinks, and then have a big shindig on the Monday night, meaning that you wake up with a whole week ahead of you with a hell of a hangover. It's just like the worst idea ever.
But I mean, the dream, Chris, is a straightforward shooting weekend, right? It's it's arrive on Friday night, relatively quiet Friday, shoot on. I mean, maybe a duck flight on Friday night, if maybe. But then a good day's shooting, big do in the evening on a Saturday. Black tie supper, all that jazz, and then a fairly quiet Sunday morning with a decent breakfast, and then everybody toddles on their way feeling slightly worse for wear. I mean, it's a genuine life ambition of mine to be able to organise one of those for my friends. Big country house, the whole shebang.
Yeah, big birthday type thing. I know exactly what you mean. George, guess George. I'm going to ask you this one in a second. But you're absolutely right, George. That is an absolute dream. The Friday, the Saturday. How about this, though? Because I did think about this a few years back. If you arrived at the shoot on the Saturday, shot Saturday, I mean, we're talking like lack of responsibility to be able to do this, like very few children knocking around, that sort of thing. So this wipes most people out. But arrive at the shoot on the Saturday, decent shoot, really good, boozy Saturday night party. Sunday off, but all get together for a nice roast on Sunday. Chilled, early to bed, wake up for a day on the Monday, and then head home after shooting on the Monday. That, for me, has got to be the ultimate shooting weekend.
And Chris, the fact that you're talking about lack of responsibility and children and this and that and everything else means that I think you may have actually got things slightly wrong, given that you've just got married. Because when I met my wife, the first thing I said to her was, "My darling, you are very good looking." However, I'm in the gun trade and I work weekends, and that's how it stayed. That has been that's been my mantra, as it were, throughout.
So when you go to see your mates, you just say you're going to work. Is that what you...
I don't know whether she's going to be listening to this podcast or not, so I'm going to. I'm just going to move swiftly on from there.
I can tell you that excuse has not held any water whatsoever with my wife, darling. Honestly, I really would much rather be here with you.
Yeah, she could see
this
you
is where you have
to somehow sees through it. I don't know.
I think I've been building up to it all my life in the gun trade by making sure that I have sort of appropriate photographs and things taken at weekends with clients so that I could provide evidence at my engagement party to say this was how things are going to be from now on.
What do you think then to the double day with a gap in the middle on a Sunday?
I think it's... No, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And one thing I was going to say is that both of you have really just skipped to the very last question I think you're going to come up with at the end of this podcast about what the ideal kind of
island shooting.
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
hold that.
Well, hold it, because it's at the end, as you know.
But George, you have obviously travelled the world to shoot. You've been on some pretty amazing things, but there must have been a few tales that you can possibly share with us. You did actually share one or two kind of teasers with us earlier. There's a couple of leapt out at me. Can you tell me? Well, we can't go any further without you telling me about Chris's dad and the Petrus story.
Well, this is my favourite shooting story, and it makes me look bad ultimately, but because I like the story so much, I love telling it. So basically, one of the shows that a lot of the British gun makers, gun trade do in America happens in Las Vegas every year, and we were at the Mandalay Bay Convention Center, and we were with some clients, and these clients needed some food, and they were talking about buying new guns, and Chris's father, James Horn, took us to a restaurant called Fleur. And we sat down, and James looked at us all and said, "Right, gents, you can have anything you want on the menu." So I went straight to the bottom right-hand corner of the menu, where I saw the Fleur Burger 5000. Now, the Fleur Burger 5000 is 2 patties of Wagyu beef, truffle, and foie gras, and it's served with a bottle of Petrus.
Jesus.
Now, The cost was $5,000. Hence the Flurburger 5,000. I got a rather stern look from my then chairman, Chris's father, as if to say, you will not buy that. But a little bit later on, after we'd all had a bit of wine, James said to me, right, if you guys sell tomorrow off the stand, if you actually sell a gun with extra finish engraving on it, so that is to say 30 grand's worth of engraving on it, and you take the money on the stand, he said to myself and my colleague at Purdey at the time, Al, he said, I'll buy you a bottle of Petrus out of my own pocket. And I thought that was very generous until I realized that we don't have a method of taking money on the stand at this convention. So we don't have a card machine. No one's going to drop 200 grand in cash with us. It was just a no-go. 10:30 in the morning, half an hour after the show opens, this chap walks up to us and he says, he says, been looking for you guys. I've heard you make nice guns. And long story short, he ordered 8 guns with large scroll and game scene engraving on. And his wife turned around and said, darling, I'll give them a holding deposit, and pulled out one of those funny things called a check, which I haven't seen for years. So I was excited about the gun order. James was excited about the gun order. And then Al suddenly clocked that actually this could mean a little bit more for us and started waving the check in front of James's face. And James realized he was now several £1,000s down because he was going to have to cough up for a bottle of Petrus. So many months went past and we didn't see this bottle of wine. And Al and I started to get sort of slightly comically angry about it and say, right, come on, you've got to cough up here. And James turned around and said, look, I'll tell you what we'll do. He said, I'll go and buy a bottle and then we'll all go shooting back-to-back days in Yorkshire. And he said, if you give me some of this wine that I owe you, then I'll buy back-to-back days shooting for us in Yorkshire. I think we went to Farndale and then Black Park. And we went up and our factory manager, Laurie, came with us. And we stayed at the Feversham Arms Hotel in Helmsley. Yeah. And we had this wonderful day's shooting. It was a perfect day's shooting. And I'd bought myself an infrared thermometer to make sure that the temperature of this Petrus was going to be absolutely perfect. Nice chilly evening. I said to James, I'm going for a massage after shooting. You put the wine out on the chilly balcony just to bring the temperature down a little bit. And so I went for my massage and then I came up to James's hotel room. Very plush rooms there. I don't know if you've been there. Lovely hotel. And we sat down and I said to Laurie, I said, record this. You can record it. You know, get your phone out, record this. It's going to be an exceptional experience. 3 nice big sort of balloon glasses there, and James starts pouring, and he spills a little bit on the table. And I thought, that's about 30 quid's worth of wine he's dropped on the table there. So I said, I don't care if this is on camera. I said, I'm going to lick that up. And I did. And then he poured the second glass, and then he poured the third glass. And we sit there and we start sniffing it, swilling it around, just like we all know what we're doing. And Al was the first to go. And he had a sip, and he goes, tastes a bit like Beaujolais. And I thought, Beaujolais, not only do I hate Beaujolais, it's the wine I hate the most. But I thought, how rude, because James has just spent thousands of pounds on this bottle of wine. And James sort of looked a bit, a little bit cross, and I was a bit cross as well. And so I had a sip, and I said, that is the best wine I have ever tasted in my life. I could drink that all night long. I mean, literally the best. So James says, I'll have a go. And he's sniffing it. Lovely. Lovely. Smell the complexity of blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he then looks at me, smiles, and chins the glass of wine. There's about 600 quid in this glass of wine. He chins it. And I looked at him and I said, what on earth are you? I went puce. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he started laughing. Anyway, so he pours himself another glass. And I thought, this is not right. I said, James, this is our wine. You lost the bet. Anyway, same thing again. Al's like, this smells like Beaujolais. It's disgusting. I'm like, yeah, it's the best wine I've ever had. James looks at me, smiles again, and chins the second glass. He'd said, I always wanted to do that. But the problem is he didn't swallow it completely. And I started getting so angry, and he started laughing. And he had a mouthful of wine. And it came out of every single orifice. I mean, it spewed out of his mouth, out of his nose. I'm surprised it didn't come out of his ears, all over the white carpet. And I was so mad. And Laurie was filming all this on the camera. And he got down on the floor, James. He started mopping up all this expensive wine off the carpet with a kitchen towel. And as he was down there, he pulled back the curtain to reveal a decanter full of wine, and he had decanted the Petrus into the decanter, and he had poured a bottle of £6 Beaujolais into the bottle of Petrus. And there was I, not only on camera, but actually on FaceTime to the entire Purdey factory, saying that was the nicest wine I'd ever had. And that was my experience of a bottle of Petrus.
So was Al in on the joke as well?
No, good on Al. He wasn't in on it. Well, at least he swears to me to this day he wasn't, but I actually genuinely believe he wasn't in on it, and he'd actually called it.
Yeah.
I say your mind plays tricks with you when people are telling you you're, drinking nice things. But it made me look a bit foolish in front of a lot of people. But I got to drink my bottle of wine in the end.
Classic George.
That's brilliant.
I wish I'd been there. But there's a sort of subtle undertone to what happened to you there, which is when you're in the experience and the moment and the excitement and everything else, it doesn't really matter what happens, does it? You're going to enjoy it. And I think that the situation that you're having with the producer there, you can relate that back to shooting, can't you? Chuck you in any restaurant, drinking anything, doing anything with your mates, and you absolutely love it. And I think that is exactly what happened to you.
I think some of the best weekends I've had have been where we've had the worst experiences. As long as you're all together with your mates, that's often what counts,
Well, I mean, I got a very recent experience of that, which is every other bugger on the fishing trip was catching fish after fish after fish, and I only caught the one. And I still had an absolutely wonderful time. And it was because I was with my family, with great friends, and just having a lovely time. And yeah, we did have some fantastic food and some lovely drink. But it's shooting, I think, like fishing, it is a team sport in many ways, team activity. And I've discovered this week that I can really take as much pleasure, or nearly as much pleasure, in somebody else catching a fish as I can in catching one myself. And yes, you want to catch one yourself, but seeing somebody else's joy and being there, and or as I did a few times, doing the gillying work, is a really, really special thing, and it's just lovely. And I think that's the same with shooting.
George, you've just reminded me of something, which was going back to that day where I had the marmalade vodka for the first time. Chris, I don't know if you remember this. I was right out on the end peg, on peg number 8. We were down at Moulton, I think. We're somewhere down. I think we were down there.
Molland.
Was it South Moulton? Molland, that was it, Molland.
Yeah.
And we were down there, and I remember on that first drive, I was right out on the end on number 8. And it was the first time that I'd ever done this. I'm very competitive, as a lot of people will know, but it was the first time where halfway through that drive, I broke my gun open and I turned and I watched the rest of the line, because I'd never seen. Still to this day, that's the best line of guns I've ever shot with. And
was that the first
watching
drive?
them. That was the first drive on that steep bank. I remember it so clearly. And I remember just turning around and watching everybody take down these birds. And it was just watching everyone have fun and being a part of that, even when I wasn't pulling the trigger. That I've done that a lot of times since then with other people, but it's a magical thing being part of a group of people like that and watching everyone have fun.
It's one of the reasons I think that the kind of grassroots shoot. So, as I've mentioned before, most of my shooting happens on our family shoot at home, where a bag of 50 is a red letter day, and that means that when you draw one of the end pegs, the probability is you're not actually going to put your gun up. But some people might think of that as being a negative, but actually I kind of relish those moments, because you do get to stand and observe what's going on elsewhere on the line, and I think that's a really special thing to be able to do.
You alluded to disasters a minute ago there, and I think it's such an important point, because you can go to some of the worst situations and have some of the best fun ever. And I can't really tell too much about this story, because it's probably a few people listening that are involved. And anyway, we rocked up to this castle.
No names, no pack drill.
Rocked up to this castle in Scotland, and that's as far as I'm going with that one. And they just weren't really set up properly. They were trying to push the shoot a bit, and it didn't really work. And the shoot didn't really work. Everyone had fallen out. The whole thing wasn't really going according to plan. But we had an awesome team there, and just went for it. Just really had a right laugh. And I think probably by the end of it, a couple of them pushed it too far. But the shooting was irrelevant to the weekend. Absolutely irrelevant. The fact we'd all got to Scotland together, big journey, met up at the services. It's weirdly just having a sausage roll in the services with your mate just before a shoot, before on the way up for a shoot trip, is just so exciting, and that's exactly what we're sort of getting at here. And anyway, the weekend turned out to be one of the highlights, but nowhere near because of the shooting.
Now, Chris, you talked about disasters, and we were having a chat. One of our very vague planning sessions. I don't want this episode to become the James Horn slanging episode. But you did mention something about your dad's stag do, and I'm intrigued.
Well, it was in the line of sort of disasters. It wasn't a proper disaster. It was. So he's remarried, and we had a simulated day with West London. I forget, in Oxfordshire somewhere. It was really good fun, and then we went back to this pub, and there was like a sort of a village festival going on outside. It was just the most bizarre situation. And everyone had far too much to drink. I'm sure this is going to have happened to so many people who are listening. So we all go to bed like really late. And one of the guys, older chap, wakes up in the middle of the night. Obviously doesn't really know where he is. Has had an absolute skinful the night before. And then goes to the first door that he thinks is the bathroom. Opens it, goes in when he needs a wee, right? Door shuts behind him, slams shut. He's standing in the corridor, stark naked, of this hotel. And he can't get back into his room. It's one of those places where they lock the dividing door towards reception and everything else, so you can't really do anything. You just got to go knock on other people's doors. He found a window that was open, climbed across a roof naked, and then crawled back into his room. And I swear they must have caught it on CCTV, but it's one of those moments when it's like exactly what you go for.
Chris, this is kind of a bit uncanny, actually, because it seems that your father actually has a propensity for going to events where this happens. Because in Las Vegas, in the Bellagio of all places, the same thing happened to someone who was there as our guest on the Purdey stand. He is an unnamed person in the gun trade, not the British gun trade, I hasten to add. And the same thing happened to him. He'd had a little too much. He had a long flight. I think that's what it was. He was very tired. He'd had a long flight. And
what, tired and emotional, like Boris Yeltsin used to be?
Very tired and emotional. Yeah, he won lots of money on the blackjack table, and then no one knows where it went after that. But he did the same thing, and it was he went to bed at 1:00 in the morning on a Saturday night in the Bellagio, and he went to the bathroom, shut the door behind him, turned on the light. He wasn't in the bathroom; he was in the corridor. But you can't climb out of the 17th floor of the Bellagio Hotel. So he went down the lift and he went across the casino floor to reception wearing the same kind of thing as you were just describing, Chris. In other words, his birthday suit. And he went up to the reception and said, "My name is so-and-so, and I appear to have lost my key." And they handed him a key. And he walked back across the Bellagio casino floor at 1:00 in the morning.
I was going to say, I reckon they're probably quite used to that sort of thing at the Bellagio.
Yeah. But of all places, and he lost the quite significant amounts of chips that he'd won the night before. No one knows where they went to.
Dear.
So George, you've travelled across the pond a lot. You've been shooting in America quite a bit. How do our counterparts across the pond take to these sorts of antics? The amount of sort of fun around the shooting aspect.
Well, being very serious about it for a second, the one thing that absolutely amazed me the first time I went out there, and it doesn't continue to amaze me because I understand them now, is actually their attitude towards shooting in general. If you go to any shoot, game shoot, or clay shoot, or whatever it is, pretty much everywhere I've been in America, you are not allowed even a beer at lunchtime if you're going to pull the trigger in the afternoon. And there are strict club rules at the sporting clubs, at clay shooting clubs, shooting schools, and so on. Very strict rules. I think the British have very much an idea that the Americans are, gung ho. but they're not. They're very, very, very serious about it all.
I should just quickly add that at no point during this podcast we've suggested drinking during the day at all. Actually, we're very
Well,
careful about that.
that would be very bad form, of course. But actually, I was very surprised about how serious they took it, and delighted at the same time. And they actually take all aspects of their shooting probably more serious than the British do in terms of their their species identification and everything. So it's a real experience going over there. But the one thing I've learned more than anything else is the difference between shooting and hunting. And the reason they call it hunting is because the majority of the time they are hunting. It's not stand there with the birds coming over you, driven over you. It is take your dog and you'll limit 6 a day in many cases of whatever it might be. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I've gone out on hunts with them where you start at 7 in the morning, finish at 5 in the evening, and you've not seen a thing all day, and it's great fun.
That's exactly it. It's like salmon fishing, which is why everyone goes to Russia now, not Scotland. Is that the concern though?
When you say everyone,
well, no, I mean not everyone, but you know what I mean. The demand's there. That's really good to hear, though, George, isn't it? Because if anything was to happen, if anything awful was to happen to shooting here in the UK, you look at our friends over there, absolutely loving exactly what you've just experienced. It's perfectly possible. It's just we're used to the way we currently do it.
Absolutely. And I think, whilst I say what I've said, that doesn't mean they don't party in the evening. And of course they do. But I tend to find things are that they are more serious out there when it comes to the alcohol side of things, but they know how to have fun. They know how to have a lot of fun. But you'll find that if they're up at 7 in the morning, they're in bed at 9 at night. The fun is condensed and serious.
I think the distinction you make between hunting and shooting is a really interesting one. Now, you could go and stand in a field and have somebody push birds over your head by yourself, and that would be a thing. But I guarantee you wouldn't have as much fun as if you had 7 of your mates with you doing the same thing. And that is, as it were, shooting. So the shooting as a thing needs other people with you. Hunting can be a solitary activity. You, Absolutely. Your dog, out doing the kind of wild man thing. And I think that
they do very much focus on that in America. And it is 2 very different sports, for want of a better way of putting it.
So, I don't know why my mind's starting going down this route. I've had a gin and tonic. I think that's a fascinating thing you've just said, because you're absolutely right. Drop an email to a few mates offering them a 200 bird day. Say that you've been offered a 200 bird day for 2 guns. It's just that you can't make that date, but they won't let anyone fill the place. Would you still like to go? And offer it to your friends and see how many of them write back saying, "Yeah, I'll definitely take it."
Oh, what you mean shooting with nobody?
Yeah, literally. Just send an invite. Offer an invite to some of your mates. See how many of them come back and say yes to a single gun. I'll bet none.
I quite like to give that a go, I have to say.
Well, that's what I was thinking. All right, do it between now and Saturday, and I'll see you on Saturday night. We'll compare notes.
Right. Well, I think that's a really good place to kind of try and round things off a bit. But George, as you alluded to earlier, the way we'd like to finish all these episodes off is to ask our guests to describe their desert island shooting, the sort of fictitious one last day, shooting's being banned, or for whatever reason you're not going to be allowed to shoot anymore. So you've got one last hurrah. Money's no object. Logistics aren't an issue. What are you going to do? Where are you going? Who are you going with? What's the plan?
I had this answer all lined out for you, and I'm now going to change it. And I'm going to plagiarize here. Okay. Because I'm tweaking it. Because Chris, what you said earlier, you've nailed it. You've nailed it. You go down on the Friday night. You have a gentle session. Saturday you're shooting. Saturday night you have the big party. Sunday you're resting with a serious Sunday lunch, and then it's poker Sunday evening, and then off home on Monday morning. Where?
No. You shoot Monday as well.
Oh, well, in that case, I'll do that too. I actually wouldn't. It wouldn't actually bother me.
No, I
The
agree with you.
duration of the trip is not important. The fact that you're having time before and time afterwards,
Yeah,
and time to talk about it at the Sunday lunch
yeah,
properly, time afterwards.
yeah.
I think that's the main thing for me. Location is totally irrelevant, absolutely totally irrelevant, and the shooting for me would actually largely be irrelevant as well, as long as we're all in it and as long as we're all having some fun. I'm not going to sit there and say I want one of these ridiculously large days, but I don't want a walked up day. I would want something that is driven shooting as we know it, where we're all in the action, lots of drives. Funnily enough, one of the things I don't like so much is these bigger days where you do 3 or 4 big drives. I want to do 7 small drives. I want to get started early, finish late, so we're all swapping around. We can all see each other shooting. We've got plenty of time to try and shoot each other's birds and have a bit of fun, mix up the pegs between drives. It's all about the fun for me. Don't care where it is.
Bit of scenery. Go on, give us an area, give us a region. Because actually, that also dictates where you're going to go on your Sunday lunch. Because you could probably choose a restaurant, couldn't you? Pub.
You could do, but you said money, no object. So I'd have a couple of helicopters standing by, I think, to take us to lunch somewhere. But I honestly, Chris, I couldn't tell you. I've had so much fun in the West Country, in the South, in Wales, in Yorkshire. Scotland obviously has its own special thing about it. I think if I had to choose anywhere, I'd probably choose somewhere in Yorkshire.
Okay.
I think it's just the Dales for me. I just think are so beautiful. But I really mean it when I say I don't think location matters for me.
Yeah.
Just
it's
as long
good.
as we're all there.
It's all about the fun, and that's why you're here.
Absolutely.
I think you've summarised it very nicely, and I would love to be in your list of 9 somehow to make that trip, because I couldn't agree more. Couldn't really care what I'm doing. Actually, to be honest, I bring the dog and stand at the back.
I think you actually made it into my dream team, didn't you, Chris? And that included dead people. So if you're
Is that a compliment?
I think it is.
Shoots better than dead people. I don't know.
Oh, it's very good of you, George. Well, lovely to have you with us. Thank you very much for coming on.
It's been great, George. Thank you ever so much. Now, if all this talk of boozing and general silliness has whetted your appetite, so to speak, as we said before, there are 20 pairs of tickets available for the Guns on Pegs podcast party at the Game Fair. Come and see us on the stand, buy the membership enclosure, or drop us an email between now and Saturday night, and you might just find yourself on the guest list. If you don't find yourself on the guest list, but you do still want to drop along, there's still a pretty good chance, assuming the weather holds. So, come and see us. It's going to be a really exciting time. To anybody who is listening who is already on the guest list, we're really looking forward to seeing you there. So before we go, there's a final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by getting in touch to let us know where you've been listening, or suggesting finds for syndicates. Remember that from a few previous episodes. Just send us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we use it, we'll send you some garters. Finally, if you've enjoyed listening to this episode or any before, do leave a rating or a review on your podcast app of choice. It really does help us. It helps us to reach more people.
And it makes us feel good, doesn't it?
It does make us feel good.
It's a little warm feeling inside, like a slow
warm
gin.
and fuzzy. Yeah.
We'll leave it there.
So anyway, we will be back. We will be back after the Game Fair with a special Game Fair episode with some cool stuff that we've recorded at the Game Fair, maybe some other little bits and pieces. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye. I am so fucking hot.
Look at the shine.
It's genuine, wet, genuinely sweaty.
I'm just going to turn my air conditioning up a little bit.
Little shit.